Well, welcome everyone to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I am Patrick.
And I'm Tony.
And we're on our last portion of our Reformed Apologetic method, and we're going to talk about the notable strengths and notable weaknesses, if there are any. We're not sure yet, for our book, Faith Has Its Reasons by Kenneth Bowman, Robert M. Bowman Jr., where we're looking at four main apologetic methods, and then our authors suggest a fifth one, and we'll be covering that those final two after we're done here. And so we're in the kind of the middle part of chapter 15. What we've done last week is we've summarized the Reformed apologetic method. And what we've done is we've skipped certain things in this part because there's kind of like a faux dialogue that happens, and it's worthy to be read because it allows you to kind of take in the information in a dialogue form that might be helpful to you if you're thinking about, well, what would this method kind of sound like being carried out among two or three people? And so those are good, but it also doesn't make for that great a podcast. So we'll leave that one up to you. And there's also good charts in here to kind of break down, well, what were the basic plot points of the method. And so our authors include that as well in both the print version and also the ebook version of these ones as well.
Right. So the bottom line is get the book. It's good.
Yeah.
We're not covering everything in the book. The book has a lot more than what we're able to cover here.
Yeah, it is worth the price of admission. I was seeing if there was a price in the book, but it doesn't look like it. But it's going to be under the $40 mark, which I think we've sung the praises of this book well enough that you'll get your money's worth for it as well. All right. Well, what are the notable strengths of the Reformed Apologetics according to our authors? Well, Reformed Apologetics is really the newest of the four approaches discussed in this book, and newest meaning like within the past 600 years maybe, and is easily the most controversial and misunderstood. And I think that's very true, especially when it comes to either people understanding it, not wanting to understanding it, to characterize it, to mischaracterize it, or to not read the people that they claim to have read who have helped to spawn this method. But even most of its harshest critics have recognized some of its strengths, which are considerable, and then we'll highlight just a few of them, they say.
Right. So the first one that our authors want us to understand is that one of the strengths of Reformed Apologetics is that it links apologetics and theology, right? So it doesn't cut off apologetics and make it a separate, this is philosophy kind of thing. And over here is theology and the Bible and that sort of thing. No, it links them both together, right? So Reformed apologists have made a powerful case for recognizing that apologetics inevitably presupposes theology. That is, the apologist has a specific understanding of Christian theology that informs his method as well as the substance of his defense of the Christian faith. So we don't dismiss everything that we know about, the Christian faith in order to do apologetics, right? It's linked with all of our knowledge of the Christian faith. So, for instance, if one believes that all human beings have an inner sense of the divinity, the sensus divinitatis, right, by which they really know that God exists, right? If we really believe that, as Romans 1 claims, then whatever that a person may tell themselves or others, that will affect how one argues for God's existence. So if you really believe that everyone has a sense of God, that God is impressed upon them, at the time that he created them, then you need to use that in your apologetic method. That's the basic idea here, right? So the apologist, for instance, who has this view of the unregenerate person is not likely to agree, for instance, that the shoulder of the burden of proof on the question of God's existence is on the apologist, right? If you believe that everyone has this sense of God, then the burden of proof is on the person who is attempting to deny that. not on the apologist who's claiming, no, you do have that sense of God. And so this link then between apologetics and theology and this, unabashedly approach that says, I'm going to use everything I know about Christianity to make my case is, our book suggests, an important part of Reformed Reformed apologetics.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where maybe we see like, oh, well, I just don't have enough philosophy in me to be as smart as the people out there. And so we have this kind of idea of like, well, the people who are apologists are like, it's like an office. It's an unofficial office of the church. And you have those smart people that want to talk about modus ponens and all these things. And I just don't have that. I just want to present the gospel to my unsaved family, and I don't want to get in the weeds of this ipso factum, post hoc, era hoc type deal, and so it moves it too much to the cerebral. But then when it comes to the evidentialist, well, okay, it's very, very good to have a good understanding of history and the evidences of Jesus' resurrection and being able to prove that the walls of Jericho fell and were on fire. That's all good. But then when it comes to things like, well, okay, that's all well and good, but now here's a moral issue that I have. Well, then I have to take off my hat and put on my theology hat. And so what is nice about the Reformed apologetic method is that it doesn't divorce those two things together. It brings in an understanding of God's world and having a coherent, complete system that you don't piecemeal out, that you have, and you're discussing it based on what the Bible claims about itself. And so when you do Bible study, you are doing apologetics. You're filling your quiver with information to present to the other side as well. We've talked about apologetics being both offensive, defensive, and that's helpful. And also, we can know things like, Philo talks about Jesus, or Josephus makes claims that help to bolster the ideas of the Christian movement that are very early. But then I don't have to separate myself from that when someone says, well, what happens if I lose a child in childbirth? Oh, okay. There's no putting on a different hat. It's just rearranging kind of the question to still be there. But that's still a Christian worldview that goes out from those things and brings things back in. So, yes, I will agree with them. I think this does a good job of connecting apologetics and theology. All right. The second one is that it raises epistemological awareness. Again, epistemology is our how we know things. So probability, probably the central and most distinctive aspect of the Reformed apologetics is the emphasis of reckoning with the epistemological dimensions of belief and unbelief. Reformed apologists have forced apologists of other approaches to become more aware of their own epistemological framework, as well as those of the non-Christian they are seeking to convince. There's no neutrality, and so why are you giving people on the other side a neutral platform that you then step upon? What does that mean to your witness? And so that's the call. That's the transformation that we want to speak against here. Well, this epistemological consciousness raising has a number of different elements that they go on to talk about.
Right. So they're going to list several of these epistemological elements. First, the Reformed apologists have made a forceful case for recognizing that there's an epistemological divide between Christians and non-Christians, right? Mm-hmm. Christians recognize that our knowledge faculties have been corrupted by sin and need restoration through the regeneration and sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit. Non-Christians obviously generally do not recognize the situation. So there is this divide then between the basis of knowledge between the Christian and the non-Christian, right? And so that's the first thing that Reformed Apologists wants us to understand. There's a different perspective, a different worldview at work here, even though the foundation of it is really God and His revelation. There's a denial of that by the unbeliever, right?
All right, well then second, Reformed apologists have made apologists of all approaches more aware of the role of presuppositions play in human thought in general and in religious thought in particular. It is not so much the stated assumptions or beliefs as the unstated presuppositions that prevent non-Christians from taking Christianity seriously. So even if we're talking about characters in fiction, we still have to have a touch point to the God of the Bible, providing the necessary preconditions for intelligibility in order for us to even read a story, to have touch points between us and a fictional world, and then how much more so in between us and the real world, and how about us when it comes to our political lives, or us and how we raise our children, or us and how we view education. So all those things are predicated on presuppositions that we may not have kind of come to fully recognize we're always there, but have been there. And so we just sometimes are too easy to say, well, we're just doing this because of the fact that it's expected of us, or something along those lines. And so this method allows us to kind of take a step back in the general, but also in our everyday religious outpouring. Does the work that I do based on my faith in Jesus Christ, is that predicated on my understanding of the God of the Bible? Or is this just something that I'm expected to do because it's traditionally been known to happen in my church? So those highlights have been helpful with this method.
Right, exactly. And so we have to kind of understand those various presuppositions. This gets us to our third point here. The Reformed Apologist rightly emphasizes, our authors tell us, that a discussion of only facts may prove fruitless if the non-Christian's philosophy of fact is not challenged, right? There's likely little use in trying to debate, for instance, the scientific evidence for creation versus evolution with the non-Christian, who assumes that science must look at all the facts from an assumption of naturalism. So we ferret out that assumption, and we, for all practical purposes, attack that assumption, right? And so, so there's this position then that the Reformed Apologist emphasizes that just looking at facts is not going to get us that far. Right. We must unearth their particular assumptions and then go after that.
Right. Let's take for assumption that God doesn't exist. Now use the science that I say is proved and prove to me that God exists. Well, I'm going to be at a huge disadvantage because the assumption is there that it doesn't. It will never happen. So, yes. All right. Well, and then fourth, Reformed apologists should be heeded when they warn apologists to be careful not to compromise their own commitments epistemologically when defending the faith. For example, there is much to be said for avoiding the line of reasoning that the evidence for God's existence outweighs the evidence against it. So you're just if I just had 51 proofs to my 50 against it, then I should believe.
Well, okay, 49 against it.
Yeah. Can we maybe talk about why there's then so many evidences against it? Well, surely in God's world, even marred by sin, there cannot be any real evidence against God's existence if true. And so why take this assumption that there are evidences against God's existence?
Right. So think about it. Why would the Christians say, Well, I think there's more evidence for the existence of God than there is against the existence of God.
Right.
If you believe that God exists, that he's the creator of all of life and everything that's in existence, there is no evidence against God's existence, right? I mean, everything points to God. Every fact points to God. And so how can there be any evidence against God's existence, right?
Right.
That's the point that they're trying to make here.
I tell somebody that I'm married and I say, but there is good reason to believe that I'm not married. But hold on. That's entirely the weirdest way to try and show that you're married. Well, I have a ring, I have this piece of paper signed by witnesses, but also the pictures in my household, I photoshopped all of them. I mean, we're not going to say that. And so therefore, that would be a weird way to present this counter evidence to the existence of being married. So it's a weird way to frame it on God existing or not.
Right. And so the point that they're making here with these various four issues here is that Reformed Apologetics raises this epistemological awareness that needs to be there for a person to do, apologetics appropriate.
Right.
That's the basic idea.
All right, and then our last strength that our authors say about the Reformed apologetic method is that it offers strong rational challenge to unbelief. The transcendental argument used by Van Til has a great deal to commend to it. First, from a Christian point of view, the premise of the arguments surely must be regarded as true. God is the presupposition of all meaning, knowledge, logic, fact, and moral value and judgment. That's quite a bit. That's quite heady. Anything important in life falls probably under the one of those areas of existence. It is because God exists that all these things are what they are, and it is because we were created in God's image that these things can be intelligible to us. And that's a really good position to be in.
Yeah. Good. Secondly, the transcendental argument, our authors tell us, is applicable in any context and in relation to any question. Right? Classical and evidentialist apologists require some familiarity with specific philosophical arguments, right? The cosmological argument or whatever, or with various bits of information and tend to plow over the same ground repeatedly. Van Til's transcendental argument, our book says, on the other hand, maintains that any and every fact is intelligible only on the presupposition of a rational, absolute, and personal creator whose universe reflects his nature. So you don't have to have some specialized knowledge
Right.
in order to get to God, right? Everything speaks of God as the creator.
Right. We got rid of the Gnostics for a reason, and so we don't need to go back to them.
Right.
All right, and then third, the transcendental argument puts non-Christians on the defensive. Now, it doesn't have to be prove to me that God doesn't exist, but it's to say, hey, guess what? You have certain commitments that you're using this area of things that you're using for proof, but do you have justification for them? So the question is, by what standard or by what reason, or you provide the burden by which you are able to utilize these things or have knowledge of these. The burden of proof is laid on them to give an alternative account of the rational ground of meaning or morality. They are confronted with the philosophical prejudice against Christianity and their need for a changed attitude towards the Bible of the God.
Right. So how do you justify morality? How do you justify the laws of logic? How do you justify induction in science, right? How do you justify those things? And if you don't have a good reason for holding to those things, then and it's arbitrary, then how can you say that you have any knowledge of anything? Right. And so that's that. So there's a challenge there from this transcendental argument that puts, as our authors suggest here, non-Christians on the defensive. We go after their basic worldview and say, look, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't hold water, says the Reformed apologists, right? If you don't have a good reason for reason, right, then how can you make sense of anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you justify anything, right? Or how is morality, how is the existence of morality justified without a personal God? All values are personal, right? They don't just come in an impersonal, by chance universe. There has to be a person. And for them to be universally applicable, there has to be a transcendent person, right? And so, and so this transcendental argument, as they say, puts the non-Christian on the defensive.
Right. Right. Lots of good stuff there.
All right, what about the potential weaknesses of Reformed apologists? So I think they give us three here that they suggest. Now, as I was looking at this, just by way of commentary here, these don't seem like really tough weaknesses, right? They seem like things that can be easily solved. It seemed to me anyway, but
and some of them seem like strengths to me too. So.
Yeah. So there's just about three of them here. So let's kind of work our way through. So first they say, let us consider a common misunderstanding about the Reformed apologists. It's not a kind of fideism, right? So fideism denies that there can or should be any rational argument given directly in support, defense, or vindication of the Christian faith. The fideist says, just believe, just have faith. You don't need rationality or any rational arguments. In fact, faith is antithetical to reason and that sort of thing. So all you need to do is just believe. That's what it's a leap of faith, right? Well, our authors tell us that that's not what presuppositionalist or Reformed apologist is all about. The 20th century Reformed apologists, profiled in the chapters here that we've been looking at, have vigorously repudiated fideism in name and substance. Van Til, for instance, against Kuyper specifically, suggests that the Christian faith can and should be defended rationally. And he developed his transcendental presuppositional argument as a method for rationally defending the Christian faith. And so the first point that our book wants us to see is this kind of, we might say, a strongman argument. Well, it's just fideism. Right. Well, no, it's not, right? They take a position against fideism.
Right. Well, and the main reason for the frequent charge for that the Reformed apologists are fideists is that they often are characterized, their arguments for Christianity as circular. That's how people say, try and hand wipe it away. Oh, well, that's just a circular argument and fails. And so it's just, just believe. That's all you're doing. At its best, then, the Reformed approach does not beg the question of the truth of Christianity. Its argument is circular only in the sense that it seeks to show that ultimately all argument and proof are possible because the God of which Christianity speaks does exist. And so, again, it has to provide a foundation for the ability to read the language of the Bible in order to understand it. So the conclusion is there. And so does it give you the ability to read words, to comprehend things, to trust your memory, to have a sense of communication through visual means? Okay, well, if it does that, then you're able to have a conclusion that then gives an account for the ability to read. And so that's what's happening here in this kind of fake circle here. And in any case, there are some reasonable concerns that various critics have expressed that are worthy of serious consideration. And so now they'll highlight them here.
Right. So first, what they do is they take to task this claim that, it's just fideism, right? And no, it's not. In fact, Reformed apologists argue against just this leap of faith kind of approach. They want to give us rational defense of the Christian faith. Right. So that's kind of a straw man kind of criticism. Well, what are the criticisms then, as they see it? Well, here's the first one. A Reformed apologist assumes a rigidly dogmatic Calvinism, right? Now, the problem, they say, is the tendency among Reformed apologists to engage in relentless critique of other Christian theologians and apologists, even other Reformed apologists, right? On exceedingly, they suggest, narrow grounds, sometimes to the relative neglect of actually engaging with non-Christian thinkers. So the problem here is their attack on other folks who don't have their own theological convictions, right? And they spend so much time attacking those folks that sometimes they never get around to dealing with the non-Christian, right? That's the issue here. So this rigidly dogmatic Calvinism. Now, while apologists cannot avoid adopting specific theological points of view, our book tells us they can avoid this excessive dogmatism and party spirit that has marked the conservative wing of Reformed apologetic tradition. Now, they give that in one hand, but they kind of take it back on the other hand, right? They suggest that in recent years, apologists in this tradition, the Reformed tradition, have begun to overcome this weakness. And they mention John Frame and Vern Poultris have both written books emphasizing the need for Christians of varying theological perspectives to learn from one another, right? So what's given in one hand is kind of taken back in the other.
I don't know. So being dogmatically Calvinistic is a negative approach. Okay. All right. I had to make sure where the divide was if we were still in the positives, because maybe there are 4 positives here, and then no. So yes, if you're not a Calvinist, you may not like this approach as much, and I think pretty much the Reformed position holds squarely the presuppositional method quite well as being the majority there. All right. Well, what else does it do that it might be negative? Well, it might underestimates the power of facts. The Reformed apologists rightly stress the importance of challenging the philosophy of facts presupposed by non-Christians. However, they overstate the case when they maintain that facts alone cannot persuade non-Christians to embrace a Christian worldview and faith. The truth is that one valid and effective way of challenging people's faulty philosophy of fact is to confront them with facts that do not fit their philosophy. And this was a question that I asked Jason Lyle when he was on our show. If God can use pretty much any method to bring about saving faith, then why engage in presuppositional apologetics? And so he would say, well, just because God can use an imperfect person to bring about the perfection of faith, it doesn't mean that we should actively seek out what he would view as the negative approach of these various methods in order to bring about salvation. So that would be my critique here, to say, well, why do this if confronting people even with facts can bring them about, and they can at the very least see that here's a fact that fits outside of your claims that this is what you'll see. And so the Reformed apologetic method tends less to shove these facts into people's faces a little bit more than what other ones might.
Yeah, so the issue here is the notion of theory and evidence and fact, right? Usually we think of a fact being evidence for a position or a theory when it adds to the probability that the theory or the position is true, right? But we also see facts within our worldview, right? And so the fact here is is taken as viewed within a particular worldview, and so it's pretty difficult to kind of make that separation, right? When I look at a rock, if I'm an evolutionist or whatever, I might say, well, it's millions of years old. Well, the fact is that there is a rock there, but how I interpret that rock is based on how I view things, right? And if I'm a creationist, I might say, no, I don't think so. It's probably several thousand years old, right? And so the facts in and of themselves is the point that the Reformed apologist is attempting to make. it's pretty difficult that they speak for themselves. They speak with regard to the worldview based on the worldview. So we interpret our facts based on our worldview. And that's the point that the Reformed apologist is trying to make. Now, we can grant that, well, if you overwhelm people with enough, facts that go against their worldview, well, now they have to begin to question their worldview. But notice what you're really doing is questioning their worldview, not necessarily presenting a bunch of facts, right? That's the idea here.
Right.
So they suggest here that the last problem that at least they raise here is that this Reformed Apologetics places excessive restrictions on apologists, right? So they restrict apologists. How? Well, following up on the point just made, Reformed Apologetics, they tell us, unnecessarily limits themselves in the kind of apologetic argument that they can and will use. Both Clark and Van Til refuse to use any sort of inductive empirical argument for Christianity. Reformed apologists contend that the theistic proofs, as traditionally formulated, are logically flawed. And so since they don't use them, our book is suggesting they're missing out on potential ways of arguing with regard to the non-Christian. Mm-hmm. And so what they suggest is perhaps these are logically flawed, but then perhaps they may not be. And so let's not throw out, we might say, the baby with the bathwater, right? That's what they're trying to get at. And so, to a certain extent, you want to use a method that possibly work. But notice, you don't want to use a method that's at odds with your beliefs in an attempt to get someone to come over to your beliefs, right? That's what the Reformed apologist doesn't want to do. And so, let's assume that God doesn't exist. And so, well, no, you don't want to do that, right? Now, you might want to do that for argument's sake, but you don't want to stand on that kind of neutral ground. Well, let's say we don't know whether or not God exists. Well, no, let's not say that, right? And so that's the problem here. Excessive restrictions on apologetics. Yes, we should be able to use any method. As Van Til says, all facts point to God. So any method can get us there, right? But we need to be careful that we don't use a method that's at odds with our basic beliefs. And then attempt to get someone to believe those beliefs based on something that goes against what we suggest is true.
Right. All right. So the negatives are you have to become a Calvinist, and then you have to look at facts through the positions of worldview, which is exactly what the method teaches. And then it places a restriction on apologists in that we should talk about people's worldview and assume that there's no neutrality, which is exactly what both the Calvinists would say and also what the method is supposed to imply. So those are the negatives. And I'm just saying it's going to be great to welcome you over to the Reformed apologetic method if those are the worst negatives that we can come up with for this method. Well, all right. Here's our conclusion. Our conclusion of our authors talk about is that Reformed apologetics is a relatively new and dynamic tradition that offers some forceful and surprising ways of defending the Christian faith. However, certain aspects of the movement's history and theology make it difficult sometimes for Reformed apologists to avoid falling into Fideism. I mean, I don't know if you fall into Fideism. It just seems like if you want to be lazy, I guess you could say like, just believe it. It's fine. Like maybe that's how you fall into Fideism. Yeah. Yet, as we have seen, Reformed apologetics represents a distinct approach to defending the faith that appeals to rational standards and is characteristically opposed to Fideism. But what exactly is Fideism and why even consider it in a book on different approaches to apologetics? Well, that's what the next one is Fideism.
So we'll take a look at that in our next chapter, right? They'll begin these 3 or 4 chapters on explaining what Fideism is all about and that approach to apologetics.
Right. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. And as always, check out the short clips for for all those wanting to go back and looking at if we gave the negative approach its just due. But also you can pick up the book Faith Has Its Reasons by Kenneth Boa and Robert M. Bowman Jr. And also all the links to that are in the description below as well. And we thank you for joining us, and hopefully you've been viewing this book as helpful as we've enjoyed it. And this is our second time going through. And hopefully next time you'll join us back on as we talk about the Fideistic approach and see if it offers us the best apologetic method. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.